sitting in our Monday morning meeting, topic came up with regards to the Tom Izzo situation from the NCAA tournament, where you saw Tom Izzo get very heated and very fired up in communicating with his young freshman, Aaron Henry, in a highly critical part of the game. Now, the reason why I wanted to comment on this is I got a lot of questions behind the scenes in DMs about, all right, so we know we need to be careful in certain areas. We need to coach our players up. We need to, quote, love our players more. But why is the response so high to Tom Izzo and what he's doing? And I think what's important for all coaches to understand is the bigger picture here is you don't know the relationship that Tom Izzo has with Aaron Henry and the other players on his team. What you have to do as a coach is to develop those relationships. So when you are harder, when you are demanding more of your players, when you are pushing them harder, that you're doing it on a foundation where they trust you. Where too many coaches make a mistake is they try the harsher, the more aggressive approach to coaching that we used to see back in the 60s, 70s, and even into the 80s. And we can think of the famous Bobby Knight or the football coaches grabbing the face mask, which I would say he's crossing the line. But coaches today have gone to the other pendulum because of the social media outrage and parents who are scared to death to see their kids being coached from a high demand standpoint. What happens is now we've swung the pendulum back to you need to encourage your players all the time. In fact, I saw a Facebook post about this Tom Izzo situation where they said the best thing would have been to have just benched the player and told him that we will talk about it later. Are you kidding me? That's the absolute worst advice you can ever give a coach. Great coaches invest in their players, and sometimes they need to elevate their communication and their standing. What do you have to do to coach a player to get the most out of them? Sometimes requires more of an aggressive approach. Now, that doesn't mean crossing the line. And as a coach, never put your hands on a player in haste. Never put your hands on a player in an aggressive mood. If you want to have a communication with the player and it's okay, put your arm on their shoulder, but do it in a softer approach. Never make it in a threatening approach, okay? But what Tom Izzo did was he elevated what he needed that point to be. And what we have to appreciate and respect is that he has an established relationship. So I got a question about, well, what about Coach Saban? And he's pretty hard-nosed. He absolutely is hard-nosed. He demands the most out of each player that he has, okay? What you don't understand and don't see behind the scenes is his relationship with those players. There's a very famous, I would say famous, but it's actually, we had a kicker that came through there a couple of years ago by the name of Adam Griffith, who had periods of times where he struggled. And it would have been easy to yell and scream at this kid and tell him what he was doing wrong. But instead of yelling and screaming, Coach Saban didn't do that. Coach Saban actually encouraged him, gave him more confidence, tried to build him up and pump him up, would put his arm around him and tell him it's okay, get the next one. Because it's important to appreciate and understand the player, just like Find Your Approach Golf. Your goal is to understand your player 1,000%. See, Tom Izzo didn't do that recklessly with Aaron Henry. There was a point that he wanted to make with him. And it may have boiled over in the heat of the moment as a coach and as a player, but what I found brilliant was Aaron Henry as a player did not fight back. He did not roll his eyes. He did not slouch his body language. Instead, he accepted the coaching feedback. And then, through the interaction, there's other seniors coming in and trying to calm down the scenario, got both the coach and the player back on what mattered to go play the next play. The goal is to know your player. See, every player has a psychological fingerprint, and your job as a coach is to question that, understand who they are, know where to push them, know how to encourage them. When they need support, you give them support, and when they need a little bit more push, you push harder, okay? It's important that you understand that every player has buttons to push, and your job is how to build them up so you can push those buttons. But too many coaches swing the other way of the snowflakes, okay, in the offensive population. And Scott Van Pelt called it perfectly. If you're offended, who cares? It's not you, okay? So too many go the other way. They come out of the gate being hard-nosed and driven and highly disciplined and highly demanding, and they don't have the trust built up with the players. This generation, the millennial athlete, they need to know that you trust them and they trust you. But I hear far too many players make comments such as, well, I don't know if my coach likes me. I don't know if my coach, loves me, or I need more positive reinforcement. I need more praise. Praise doesn't work in the short term. It's unfortunate, but it doesn't work. See, coaches have to know how to use praise like it's a reward. But no player, less than 5% of players, maybe even less than 1% of players, will truly find the motivation intrinsically to overcome a distinct challenge. Players need to be pushed. If you question this, I tell you what, go into the gym and go do a max out session. Don't play music. Don't do anything. And see how you do. Go out and run a mile as hard as you can, and then go run a mile with somebody yelling at you. You'll perform better when somebody's pushing you. My team here, that's brilliant, former college athletes, I would say probably to a deep, Emma and Brett, you guys would want somebody pushing you and demanding the most out of you, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Great players have to understand. Listen, players, if you're listening to this, if your coach comes down on you, if your coach kicks you out of practice because your effort was bad, if your coach demands more and you leave practice ticked off, look in the mirror first. Don't blame your coaches. You call your parents and you say, I got kicked out of practice because my effort was bad. It doesn't mean it's time to transfer. It means time to reflect and look at yourself and say, what can I do to be better? What can I do to be better? Now, listen, there's a reason why 15% of male athletes in college sports are transferring. It's because that it's too many are looking for the recruiting model of being told how great they are versus the coaching model to make them better. Okay? I want you as coaches to not be inappropriate. I want you to be demanding, but also reinforcing. Now, this is what's important. They did a study years ago with parenting, and they said, what's the best way for parents to raise kids? It was to have high demands and high reinforcement strategies. What that means is you have high demands for your kids. They're not going to figure it out on their own. You got to help them figure that out. But what they also do is they reinforce them. Now, that means that they give them praise when they need praise. They keep standards where they need to be. They punish where they need to punish. They remove stressors when they need to remove stressors, okay? A kid does a great job, tell him great job. A kid doesn't do a great job, that player deserves the honesty to be told they didn't do a good enough job. Because if you continue to ignore things that aren't good enough, you get scenarios where players don't perform under pressure. Players and people don't realize how good they can be until they're in that moment. Tom Izzo was demanding that. It happened to me, and it happened to every single coach I've ever been a part of. You're exactly right, find your approach. Process creates the longevity of the outcome, but a demanding process creates the longevity of an outcome. Not an easy process, a demanding process, one that requires you to step out of your comfort zone and be better. And then you understand the situation you're coaching it completely. Now, here's the other thing I would tell you, coaches. If you want to be demanding and have high discipline, I 100% agree with that. That's how I was coached. That's how I was raised. I've had the phone hung up on me multiple times by my professors and people that have committed to making me better. I had my dad in a situation. He was former military. We were at my grandparents, not his parents, my mom's parents, 50th wedding anniversary, and an old lady came up and tapped me on the shoulder, and I turned around. Instead of standing up, I just kind of turned and said hello. My dad took me outside of this VFW hall and without raising his voice said, I couldn't be more disappointed in what you did today. You stand up when you meet somebody new. You talk to them. You look them in the eye. Don't disrespect my family that way. See, that's demand. Sometimes it requires us to elevate, and sometimes it demands us to be surgical. High standards repeat, but so do crappy standards. Crappy standards create apathy. They create mediocrity. And if you want to compete for mediocrity, go be in the offended population. Go play with them. People that are easily offended and are snowflakes are going to live in the mediocrity world. And that's fine. They can commiserate with each other and tell each other how bad the rest of the world is, while those that are committed to getting stuff done are going to push far beyond. It takes greatness to reach for greatness. So my question to you, coaches, as we sit here and finish this up, what are you doing to demand a lot out of your players? Are you telling them they did a great job? Are you telling them that they could do better? Are you giving them reinforcement when you know they need it? You know, I have players that have asked me all the time, say, well, I just would love a coach to tell me a good job. And I say, well, if I know you need that, you're never going to get it from me because you're looking for that. Aaron Henry said, look, I was raised that way. Great players are normally raised that way. Raise your kids. Coach your kids up. If you are a boss, here's what you need to do. A coach, a boss, a leader. Tell them on the front end that I'm going to be demanding. Don't surprise them with it. Tell them on the front end. I'm going to demand a lot out of you, and I'm going to be consistent. Coaches need to be consistent, clear, concise, and confident in their actions. You do those 4 things, you're going to be successful. Okay? So let us know your thoughts here about Tom Izzo and coaching and the current struggles that you have as a coach. If you see players with bad body language, if you see coaches that are players that are dropping their shoulders, demand them to demonstrate confidence. Coach them up. Don't accept mediocrity. And I'll see you next week.